It's never been level. That's like way off. It's almost like, yeah, that needs to, what do you think, lower or higher? Yeah, let's just go with it. I'm only going to go a little bit today. All right, grab a seat. We're going to start. Glad you're with us. 131 Psalm. Rod, I'll hand you your paper. Go to the test of the emergency broadcasting system. Thank you, Roger. Psalm 131 is one of the shortest psalms in the whole book. Not the shortest, but one of the shortest. Charles Spurgeon called it one of the shortest psalms to read, but one of the longest to learn. It's interesting because in Psalm 129, a few weeks ago, the psalmist was waiting for vengeance on God's enemies. In 130, he was asking for forgiveness of his sins, and we looked at that last week. And here in 131, he's going to come to a place of quiet contentment in the presence of God. We noted from the beginning of our study a few months ago that the Psalms of Ascent follow a threefold pattern. There's trouble. The next psalm is about trust. And then the third one is triumph. And then it goes to trouble, trust, triumph. And then in those 15, so there's 5 different, if you put those 3, then there's 5. So it's trouble, trust, triumph, trouble, trust, triumph, and on and on. Well, this is a psalm of triumph. In what ways, let me ask you this, in what ways is God's triumph different than the world's triumph? In what ways is God's triumph different from the world's triumph?
Greater value.
All right, has greater value for us.
It's everlasting.
It's everlasting. Yes.
God's triumph is based on love.
All right, it's based on love and mercy and grace. The world would base theirs on power, wealth, and fame, we would say. Greed, hate, yep.
Nothing good.
God's triumph would be on love, mercy, humility, contentment, and righteousness. There you go. Psalm 131 is actually going to teach us the way up is down. That might sound like an oxymoron. But the way up is down. James 4:10 puts it this way: humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Who's the author of Psalm 131? David. We see that right there, at least in my Bible, hopefully in yours. David's going to write 4 out of these 15 Psalms. He's going to write 122, 124, 131, and 133. Well, how did David learn to humble himself? How did David learn to humble himself? When you think back through his life, how did he learn to humble himself?
Even though he had some great accomplishments, he also had some time that he faltered. Once he realized his downfall, there was only one way out.
Okay? So he lived that roller coaster like we do sometimes, but he realized when the times were down, there was only one way, and that was up. Okay? Dave first and then Chris.
when Saul was chasing him around trying to kill him, he had to rely on God. So it was a humbling thing because he couldn't rely on himself.
Yeah.
So he had to humble himself to.
It wasn't told. You're going to be, and I think Dave's on the right path too. Besides, I like what you guys said too. But David refused to take Saul's life, but he had to wait to become king when the time was right. We, like David, must learn to quiet our souls in God's presence, to know his peace, to know his comfort, to know God's time. So, 131, it's simple. It's a clear instructions for us to follow. There's 3 things that we're going to look at. 3 things, 3 verses. Huh. Works great for a teacher. Number 1. Maybe. Oh, technology. Practice humility, whether it comes up or not. Well, there we go. Practice humility. I didn't know how to work with it. Somebody read verse 1.
My heart is not proud, Lord, my eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters, for things that are too wonderful for me.
All right. Is David bragging about his humility? Is he bragging about his humility? No. But he's not boasting about his humility to others. He's confessing his humility to who? To God. Right. How do you see that in verse 1? How do you see him expressing his humility to God in verse 1? There's 2 words that stand out, or should stand out to us. All right, Lord's 1. Or let's say Lord is the second word. What's the first word then?
Not proud.
If Lord is the second word, what's the first word? Look at your verse. My heart is not proud. Oh! Oh! If Lord is the second word, what's the first word? Oh! Right? Everybody's looking at me like you're confused. Right? Oh Lord, isn't that what he says? All right. And so we see that he says, he prays, oh Lord. Now, that might not mean anything to us. Unless you know Hebrew and the Hebrew language. Where you read people that know Hebrew language, like I did. All right? Those 2 words, oh Lord, come first in the Hebrew language. So David begins by addressing God, his Lord, his master. Humility begins with our focus on who? On God. In humility, we learn 3 things then. A, do not be proud in your heart. That's what we first of all. In humility, we learn 3 things. Do not be proud in your heart. Notice how he begins verse 1. My heart is not proud. The word translated proud here is a word that means high, lofty, tall. It's the same word described of Saul in 1 Samuel 10:23 when we're told that Saul was a head taller than any others. But used of the heart, this word takes on a meaning of being proud or haughty or lifting up your heart on high. Hold your finger here and go to Proverbs 18. Proverbs 18. Proverbs 18, verse 12. Proverbs 18, verse 12. Who's got that? Proverbs 18, verse 12. Kyle, thank you.
Before a downfall, the heart is haughty, but humility comes before honor.
Before his downfall, a man's heart is proud, but humility comes before honor. Now skim over, and Kyle, I'll ask you to read Proverbs 16, verse 5. Proverbs 16, verse 5. So just a couple chapters over. Proverbs 16, verse 5. And then read that for us, Kyle, when you get there.
The Lord detests all the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished.
The Lord detests all the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished. Do not be proud in your heart. Okay? So when we talk about humility, that's the first thing in Psalm 131 that he wants us to learn. All right? Number 2 is, do not be proud in your attitude towards others. Do not be proud in your attitude towards others. That's the second part of David's prayer back in Psalm 131, verse 1. He says, my eyes are not haughty. Not haughty. Now, what does that word mean? My eyes are not haughty. Sounds like something broad will say, not haughty. All right, arrogant.
Down on people.
Huh?
Look down on people. Look down on people. Yeah, get out of there.
What? Oh, look down on people. Yeah. All right. In front, I have to go home and watch that on YouTube. All right, arrogant, look down on people.
Yeah, the English Standard Version says, my eyes are not raised too high.
Okay. Yeah. It means, that's what I had, raised high or lifted up. It's often used for lifting up an object. For example, in Exodus 7:20, we're not going to turn to that. Remember what Moses lifted up in his hand? His staff. All right? It's the same word in Isaiah 6:1. I saw the Lord seated on a throne, high and exalted, and the train of his robe filled the temple. David is saying that we should not lift our eyes to look down upon others. We shouldn't do that. Then letter C. Do not feel that you have to know or understand it all. Do not feel that you have to know or understand it all. Verse 1, back in Psalm 131. He says at the end, I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. So if we break down Psalm 131, verse 1, David begins by talking about his what? His heart. Okay? Then he talks about his eyes. And now, what do you think he's talking about? I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. He's talking about his heart, his eyes, and then his... All right? But I'm looking for a body part. Huh? Not his mouth. No, that's what I thought. For physical walking, but also for the sense of how you walk or conduct your life. So if we were to phrase verse 1, things too wonderful is used many times in Psalms than to speak of God's wonders or mighty deeds there. That phrase, too wonderful. Things too wonderful. In other words, these things are too high for us, beyond our power, too difficult for us to understand, but we trust in God. So David is saying that he's learned to live above his means, not to reach beyond his grasp or expand his great efforts trying to do things beyond his ability. Go ahead, Carol.
My understanding is he put his trust in God. If he's going to be the future king, as he knows, he's not
so he's concentrated, but yet, just because he's human, he's going to mess up. But then he realizes, yeah, with his prayer, and I later on, that, hey, created me a clean heart. There. Who else? As we talk about practice humility there in verse 1, Psalm 131. And we need to practice humility. Yeah, Bob?
Years ago, I was having a conversation with a good brother, and he made a statement that stuck with my mind. He just said, I ain't so great. He was talking about in relationships, compared to God.
Mm-hmm.
We're not so great. We
Yeah.
have a tendency to think, we're pretty great at times, concerning this and that, whatever, but
Yeah.
when you come right down to it, that way, ain't so great.
No. But by the grace of God.
And the only great about it is freedom.
Yep. That's right. All right, so, yeah, go ahead, Keith.
One time many years ago, I spoke at the Italian church, and I was kind of trying to encourage people to feel more confident. I said, we need to lift ourselves up our own bootstraps. And I was quickly corrected after the class, saying, we fall short. No matter how hard we try, we fall short, so we need God's help.
Yeah. Yep. That's right, all the time.
Be humble.
Yep. All right, number 2, back in Psalm 131. Guess I did a new clicker next week. Well, the battery says it's 100%. Learn contentment.
You gotta push the button.
Yeah, it probably is. Learn contentment. Verse 2. Brian, you got that? Psalm 131, verse 2?
Sure. But I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within.
So David here is going to share what happens when we practice humility. You learn contentment. I've stilled and quieted my soul like a weaned child with his mother, like a weaned child with his mother. He gives us 3 instructions about contentment here in this verse. Number 1, A, be still before the Lord. Be still before the Lord. The word translated still here means to make still, to level, to smooth, kind of like what Rod and I were doing before class when the leg thing fell off here. We had to kind of level this there. But here it refers to ceasing from motion. It's not the rough seas sending the boat up and down, but here it's the calm, still body of water. Just calm, just still. David is saying that he has eliminated those things which agitate his soul, or things that we looked at back in verse 1. He's learned to still those things. Number 2, quiet your soul, or letter B. Quiet your soul. Quiet your soul. Word quiet here means motionless or silent. David has stilled and quieted his soul. How do you find rest for your soul? How do you find rest for your soul? All right, you focus on the Lord.
You pray, asking for help.
Okay? Pray, ask for help.
It's very common because he's always there to help us in the moment.
How do you learn to quiet your soul?
Avoid distractions.
All right, avoid distractions. So maybe you go for a walk in the woods, or a drive in the countryside. Some will drive up to church camp and just walk around it. It's quiet, except for the 6 weeks when there's people there for camp. It's a quiet place. Some will go sit at a body of water. Just that, hearing that the water hit, maybe the wind below, but it helps them to quiet their soul. We're taught, or we hear, breathe deeply, count to 10, or count to 100, or walk away. whatever technique works for you to quiet yourself. It comes from what Jesus said that we need to learn in Matthew 11. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. I am gentle and humble in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And so, be still before the Lord, quiet yourself. Go ahead.
I like the way Mike reads. He says, "No, right now I'm calm and quiet like a child, now the mercy and content is my response." We've all held little babies that are fussing and moving around and just being vocal and whatnot. And as soon as they're content with your mom, you're just
Oh, yeah.
nice and quiet
Yeah.
and calm and fall asleep. It's just, it's pretty cool.
They're usually like, here, you want to hold Johnny or Sally? And you'd be like, you give it right back, and then it's like, all of a sudden, boom, they're quiet, and it's like, oh, it's me, you know? But yeah, so quieting. Anybody else?
Be still and know that I'm God.
Yeah, Psalm 46:10. There. C, rest like a weaned child and its mother. Rest like a weaned child with its mother. That's how you learn contentment. You'll notice the repetition here, kind of like the repetition we saw last week in Psalm 130. The psalmist is using this poetic device to build up during the psalm. What is a child like during the weaning process? Huh? Fussy? Huh? Needy? Not happy? All right. Huh? What's that, Bob?
A lot of adults on.
Okay, yeah. All right. Sometimes they seem agitated, noisy, the exact opposite of stillness and quietness that we just looked at. And David has come through this process, and he learned that he doesn't need to scream anymore for his soul to be still. The restful state of a believer contrasts sharply with the restlessness of the wicked. Isaiah 57:20 and 21, but the wicked are like the tossing sea, which cannot rest, whose waves cast mire and mud. There is no peace, says my Lord, for the wicked. And so, they just like mire, mud, yuck. So any comments on learning contentment, to be still, or to find rest for our soul, or to rest like a weaned child? Dave?
You gotta give all your cares to God.
Okay, we have to give all our cares to Him.
Yeah, He'll take care of it.
Yep, for He cares for us.
It makes us more content, you know, think about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Roger?
I was just thinking, a child knows where to go when it's held to its breast, the mother, and that one spot is where it finds contentment. And I think for us, we just have to find that spot, which is alone with God, to find a place of contentment. It knows where to go every time.
Yeah.
It's contentment.
In my own age, I can't remember verses and where they are, but in the New Testament, it talks about Christ and you know, you're being weaned, and now it's solid food. You know, where is that? But anyway, you know.
Sounds like a Paul letter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Hebrews? Could be Paul. Paul Barnabas letter. Go ahead.
That's what,
Yeah.
it's a wean, and, you know,
Uh-huh.
but it's Christ. So
Yeah.
you've learned where, you know, where your strength comes from. It's all.
Yeah. Yep. Bob, go ahead.
Jesus said, lest we become like little children, we can't enter the kingdom of God. Little children can be very comfortable and very contented.
O Israel, put your hope in the Lord both now and forever. There's two things. A, put your hope in the Lord. Who is David inviting here to put their hope in the Lord? Israel. All right? He's inviting those to come share the same restful peace. Those people that are walking with him, coming to worship. Put your hope in the Lord. As we travel, as we walk, be both now and forever. Both and now forevermore. When does David stress this hope? All right, at all times? Now and forevermore. That's when he stresses it, now and forever. Now tells us that we can trust God for all our present needs. Forevermore tells us that we can trust God for what? For our future, forever needs. So one is present needs, one is future needs here.
Matt?
Yeah.
So this version says, from this time forth, which gives a suggestion to me that sometimes we get hung up on, well, I've never been faithful or I've never been whatever. And he's saying, from right now, going forward, do this.
Yeah.
You have opportunity right now to put your hope in him. Even if you weren't before, you can do it right now and move forward.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Oh, I wish I could start reading my Bible. Start now. Well, I gotta wait till January 1st to do the 1 year Bible. No, you don't. Start now. And work through April 30th next year. Start now. Now. Now it's interesting as we close here this morning, in verse 1 of these 3 verses, how does David begin the song? Oh Lord, oh Lord. And he closes verse 3, O Israel, O Lord. He's beginning by addressing God, and now he's addressing the people. O Israel. When you stop looking at yourself and start looking at God, what do you see? When you stop looking at yourself and start looking at God, what do you see? Peace, okay? Majesty.
See other people as well.
All right, you see other people, okay?
I like to think of this as king, talking about addressing the king. He has to be humble,
Mm-hmm.
and he has to be unworldly, he has to be, mind where he's going, he has to be not proud.
Yeah.
Because now he's ending it up, he
Yep.
as a king has done all these
Yep.
things, and now he's addressing
Yeah.
his Lord.
It's like one of those things where this is the universe, this is you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The lesson about hope.
Yeah, it is about hope. We need to be humble, we need to learn contentment, we need to learn to live at home. Next week we're going to jump 1 to 132. So that's where we'll be next week. Father, we love you. Thank you for your word. Help us to always put our hope and trust in you as we walk every day. Be light and salt for you, for those around us. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. If you came to first service, hope you enjoy your meal. If you're here for second service, enjoy the fellowship before the service begins. Because I threw you out, I threw you under the bus there by
you got trouble. You know. You were right back. You can always come back down. Yeah. You know, like when you got